So today we're going to talk about the solution-focused approach to supervision. And yeah, we will see how that goes. There we go. All right, so what I wanted to start with is just kind of people's own experience of receiving supervision. So I'm sure in some capacity, everybody has received supervision somewhere along the line. And so if you think about the best experience that you've had in supervision as the person receiving supervision, what are some of the things that were pleasant or positive for you? Then you can either take your mic off to speak, or you can put it in the chat and somebody will let me know what's in there.
It was affirming in terms of what you're already doing right.
Okay, affirming. And so that feels really nice, right? Feels wonderful to get that, especially when you're doing supervision and you're kind of new and you're not really sure if you're on the right track or not. So affirming is really good. And so somebody gave positive feedback, validation, absolutely positive feedback. Took time to get to know me and ask for my opinions. Okay, that's such a big one, because the get to know me makes it really personal. And then ask for my opinion. So often in supervision, people don't really have a voice, and that's not what we want to have happening. So we really want to make sure in supervision that people are being heard, people are being valued for what they bring, and that their voice is really important. So genuine connection, absolutely. Follow through with things that they say that they're due, and listening to hear, not to respond. So listening to hear and not just what they're going to say next. Freedom to make mistakes. That is such a gift when you have a supervisor that will help you embrace your mistakes to help you move forward. Okay. So these are really valuable feedback. So I really appreciate everybody doing that. And so if you think about all of these things, safety, that's a really important one as well. All of these things that are beneficial for people in supervision are really not that different from what we try to do when we're providing clinical services, right? When you're providing therapy or you're providing coaching, those are all the same skills that we're hoping to offer. So those are the things that we want in supervision as well. So to me, supervision is like a higher level of the same thing that we're doing when we're providing clinical services. It's more like a meta level of the similar thing. So we really want to take a look at all of those different skills that are part of supervision and figure out how to make sure that we're doing them and using a solution-focused approach. So one of the other things is when we're talking about supervision is just to be sure of the intention of the supervision for whatever setting you're in. So it's really different if it's like only a task setting, or if it's more of a supportive setting, if it's more of a disciplinary setting. All of those things can make a real difference as to the type of supervision that you're going to be providing. So as soon as I get the slide to move, we will. Okay, so the roles of the supervisor, they can be a few different things, but these are three that I thought were really important: to provide support and feedback, positive and encouraging feedback. I didn't write that on there, but that's what I meant. To model professional behavior is always something as a supervisor. The person that you're supervising is always watching everything that you do and don't do. And so that's another role that we have there. And then to teach specific skills. And so when you think about these three things, they're really not that different from what you would be doing in a therapy session or a coaching session. It's very similar of providing support and feedback, modeling things, and teaching specific skills. And some of these are a little bit different as we look at solution focus, especially brief therapy, but some of them are very similar as well. So we're going to go on with that. So one of the things that I like to do when I'm providing supervision, I guess I didn't do an introduction, so let me take a step back and do that. Okay, so my name is Crowley, and I am a clinical supervisor for an agency that provides social emotional skills building at kindergarten through 12th grade in the United States. And so we use a solution-focused approach with the kiddos that we work with. And so we've decided to use a solution-focused approach to supervision as well. And it's funny because when we start with we have like 40 interns, there's a ton of interns that come to this agency for their field placements. And so when we teach them how to do solution-focused work with the kiddos that we see, we teach them about the best hopes question and about scaling and all those things. And then we get to supervision and we ask them, what are your best hopes for your placement here? And they're so stunned that we've asked the same question, because it feels really different asking someone else that question and having that question asked of you. So even people that I've supervised now for a year, the employees that work there, I do their supervision as well. And I'll say, so what are your best hopes? And they're like, oh yeah, that's such a good question. Because it just is not really what we're well prepared for. I think sometimes people are more prepared for criticism. And so asking people their best hopes, that can be so freeing. So I do supervision both. I've done it for interns that are in a school environment and as well as for employees. And with the interns, what I do is I start with what are your best hopes for supervision for the, I think I'm ahead of myself on the slides, but for the length of the semester. And then we break it down into smaller ones as well. But when you start supervision with the question of what are your best hopes, it right away allows you to do those three things from the last slide, right? To be able to offer support and encouragement, to be able to model behavior, and to teach them skills. And you're also really helping them learn empathy as to what those questions feel like when somebody's asking you, because sometimes these are difficult questions. And so it's important for the person that's providing these services directly to someone else to realize that while best hope seems like it's only a positive thing and seems like a really easy question, when someone asks you, sometimes it's really difficult. You have to really dig down and think and get to an honest answer with that. So I love asking the best hopes question when you start with supervision, because it just sets a really different tone than having supervision be a place that's maybe to be feared, like somebody mentioned safety. When you ask best hopes for somebody who's receiving supervision, it really reaffirms the sense that this is going to be a safe place. This will be a place where mistakes are welcome and you can learn from them. This will be a place where there's positive reinforcement and encouragement happening. So here's what I thought I was already on. So best hopes for the long term first. So when I do this with employees, I usually ask for the next year. A lot of places where I've worked, they have like an annual evaluation. So we try and set, I don't want to say goals, but we want to set our best hopes for the coming year. With the interns that I work with, I try and do it just for the semester so that it's a shorter one. But this is really very similar to how you would start a solution-focused session. You start with, okay, so if you have your best hopes, what differences would those changes make? How would you know that those things had happened? Who else would notice those things? And so you really get people starting to look in supervision about their own professional growth, their own goals for their life, of what they would like to do if they could be the best social worker, or they could be their best selves providing services. What would that look like? And so you can use the same questions for supervision as you do for your counseling sessions. And then the scaling, this is really interesting. So the agency I work for, we have scaling questions that we ask on a weekly basis, which initially I thought would be a bit of overkill, but over the course of time, I find that I really like using these. It's interesting because a lot of the interns, especially, they'll start their scale, like I think the question that we ask is, on a scale of 0 to 10, how prepared do you feel to be a professional social worker? You know, some of these students are bachelor's students and some are masters. Some have never had an internship and some have a lot of experience. But some of them will come in and they'll say, oh, I'm like at a 1 or a 2. And then by the time the semester or the year is over, they're like at 8. And so being able to watch that progress is just fascinating and so rewarding for them as well as for you. But then you have other people that come in and at the very beginning, they say, oh, I'm at an 8. And over the course of time, their score goes down because they're realizing they don't really have as much competence as they anticipated as they learn more. And that's an okay thing as well, that their score would go like, oh, I'm an 8 and it's my first week of internship. And suddenly they're 2 months into it going, oh, there's so much more for me to learn. And so their score goes down before it comes back up. And that's a wonderful experience for them to see that as well. So it's really kind of fun to ask them that. So you can ask them where they are now, and then you can also ask the good enough question. So if you're at a 2 now, what would be good enough for you? Because everybody's not going to get to 10, and everybody doesn't need to shoot for 10. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for what they want. And with the scaling, there are so many different ways that you can use this question. You can ask them about a particular skill, or you can ask them about their skills in general. You can ask them about their level of confidence. You can ask about so many different things. So the scales question just opens up so many different avenues for you to kind of gauge their progress over the course of time. So then after you have the kind of long-term best hopes, the next thing we do is ask, what are your best hopes for today's meeting? So it really draws it down to kind of a much more specific time frame. And so after you ask that question, you can ask the what's been better since we've met. We usually meet once a week where I am. That's our norm, is to meet once a week. So you can ask what's been better. And sometimes maybe things aren't too much better. They're just consistent, which is a really good answer as well. But sometimes there's like enormous things that are better. Maybe a kiddo that wasn't talking has started to talk, or maybe a kiddo's still not talking, but the intern now feels comfortable with that silence. So there's so many things that on a week-to-week basis, improvements can be made. And so when you ask the what's been better question, it's really interesting if you ask that every week to see some of the small things, because as we all know, small things are what change over the course of time into bigger things. And then you ask, how do you know? So again, you're looking for that evidence. And is it evidence that they've noticed? Is it evidence that maybe the people they're working with has noticed, or in their classrooms? So you're kind of following up on that systemic change that Eve Lipchuk was talking about earlier. So that's kind of interesting. And then again, we ask the scaling questions on a weekly basis. And sometimes this is a specific skill that they want to work on. Sometimes it's a skill that they want to either add or improve. And this can be really small things like asking the first question, or being more creative in sessions, or ending the session on time, or being able to deal with silence. And when you deal with really small items like that, you might scale it for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and then you move on to a different scale because their scale is at their good enough level. It doesn't make sense then for you to just stay on that over and over. And then you just move to whatever the next thing is that they want to scale. So it's kind of fun to see how that change can happen. And as you're doing this, what I have found with the interns I work with is they start to claim their successes, and they start to recognize how many strengths they do have and how many skills they do have. And so suddenly supervision becomes a place that feels so good because there's so much positive reinforcement that they're getting. Hopefully it's a place that's really safe for them, but that recognition of designing this to be individual so that they can work on whatever scale they want to work on, not just one generic one for everybody. And so you're listening to who they are, looking at the areas where they want to grow, and then helping them figure out how that's going to look in their journey for them to move along. Is that making sense to everybody? Okay.
There is a question, Kathy, in the chat.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What is that?
It is, are the interns learning solution focused therapy and expected to use it?
Yes, they are. They're exposed to several different therapeutic interventions, and they're not actually doing therapy, they're doing skill building. So it's a little bit different, but they're using a solution-focused approach. So they are taught solution-focused interventions, they are taught cognitive behavioral interventions, and they are taught DBT, right? That's the third one, Ashley? DBT interventions, and a lot of play. And so they are able to draw from whatever they feel is going to work the best. The thing that's really solution focused is the way that we get the referrals. So we get the referrals mostly from the teachers, and they ask, like, what behavior would you like to see better? And so the language that we use, even when the interventions are not specifically solution focused, all of the language that we use to describe the process is very solution focused and very intentional. We do scaling questions with the kiddos, and they do the Scott Miller evaluations at the end of every session. Even with the kindergartners, they have the ones with the little faces. And so they do the pre and post scales with all of the kiddos that they meet. So there's a lot of solution focused pieces that are in it, but we do teach them additional interventions, because we know for employment, they're going to have to know more than just solution focused, especially in where we are in Arizona. There's not a lot of agencies that exclusively provide that service. So we teach them additional things as well. And I would say it's hard to remove the solution focused philosophy and kind of attitude about how we deal with everything once we do the other trainings as well. They're always a little bit slanted from like a traditional CBT. It's more of like, not like you can do solution focused and CBT at the same time, but I think the way that we approach everyone that we deal with, from the students to the teachers to the principals, all of that is very solution focused mentality. That good? I don't know why my PowerPoint's not moving. There we go. Okay, so one of the other things, when you're working with clients in doing solution focused work, sometimes you ask them like, what would your best self look like, and how you describe their best day or their best self. And so I love this idea of best self when I was learning solution focused, because it fits really well with helping interns or new employees to do a professional sustainability plan. So what would your best self look like? It has to include some way of how are they going to make sure that they're taking care of themselves and that they're going to be able to sustain working in this field for a long time. So it's kind of a fun way. We're the agency that I work at, we do a professional sustainability plan kind of with a hidden agenda of teaching them how to write a treatment plan. And so our professional sustainability plan has something that they're going to do once a day, something they're going to do once a week, and something that they're going to do once a month that they can incorporate. That's not going to be really problematic. It doesn't necessarily have to cost any money, but what are some things that they can do so that they feel like they're presenting their best self when they show up for the internship? And I don't know, it feels very solution focused to me. Although professional sustainability, I've not heard about addressed specifically, but I think it's a really good way of looking at. In supervision, obviously you want people to be able to remain employed for a lengthy period of time. And so I think sustainability or self-care is a big part of what happens in supervision. But again, I think sometimes self-care can come across as you need to journal, you need to exercise, you need to eat right, go to sleep. And it sounds very punitive, and it sounds often like it's just a generic thing that everybody needs to do the exact same thing. So I think if you're providing supervision in a way that you're really genuinely listening to the person and you're figuring out what's going to be best for them, you help them design a plan that's going to be best for them as well. I know I used to do this in my classes, and there was a class where we just asked people like, what do you do for self-care? And one person, I'll never forget this, raised her hand and she said her self-care plan would be to have like 8 people over and cook a 5-course meal. Now, that would be like my worst day ever. I just would not enjoy that at all. But it's really different from taking a bubble bath or getting my fingernails done. And what people do for self-care is just as unique as everything that you're doing when you're in therapy. Of what would it look like when you're not depressed? The answers are going to be so varied. And so again, when you allow people to grow in a way that's most meaningful for them, the professional sustainability plan is going to be a similar type thing of what does this person find is really beneficial for them? For some people, it's I'm going to sleep, I'm going to take a nap. For other people, it's I'm going to run, a 5K. And so being able to embrace whatever works for them and have that become part of their plan can be so powerful. And then it's just a kind of a gift that you give them that they're able to maintain long after they're done with seeing you, whether that's through an internship or even through employment. If people can start to incorporate those skills on a regular basis, that it becomes habit and it just becomes a part of their process. So I think that that's a valuable thing to include as well.
Rochelle, oh, real quick, Rochelle had a comment that was really powerful, I feel like, and it said, one of my supervisors once told me that I will always try my best, but my best is always going to look different every day, and that always stuck with me.
Well, and I think that's a great comment. When you're doing your best, like for an intern into school, your best in August looks really different than your best in May, right? And so when you get to May, you can't look back at August and go like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. You're doing the best that you can at that moment. And again, if you're in a situation where, you know, errors or things that you wish you had done different are embraced, it becomes an opportunity for learning. And so then you continue to grow and grow from there. So yeah, trying to do your best is always a great way to work towards that. And your best looks very, very different for different people. So I pulled out some similarities with solution-focused brief therapy. And I know everybody doesn't do exactly solution-focused brief therapy, but I just wanted to show you the similarities between solution-focused supervision and the brief therapy. So part of this, and before I even get to this, I want to say, for those of you who saw Eve Lipchick earlier, when she was talking about in the room, first you're a human, then you're a therapist, then you're a solution-focused therapist. Well, I think you could adapt that to this and say, first you're a human, then you're a supervisor, then you're a solution-focused supervisor. Like, it just makes sense to approach supervision of, I'm a human in a room with another human. And you start from there. It just fits so nicely. So there's the belief that the person is motivated for change. I think that's a really good way to start with interns, because I know sometimes interns are really afraid, and that can be interpreted as resistant or defiant or unmotivated. Sometimes they're just really scared. And so believing that they're motivated and want to learn can just really enhance the relationship that you have, especially with somebody that's new. Each person has a unique way of cooperating. I love that statement. It sounds so much better than there's no such thing as resistance. People have all kinds of interesting ways of cooperating. And I know there are some people that the way that they learn is to question everything and doubt and kind of disagree. And then they have to go away and have a think. For those of you in the UK, I like that phrase. They have to go away, have a think about it. And then they'll come back and be like, oh, and they've processed it on their own. So everybody's not going to be super cooperative in the room with you, because that's not how everybody learns. And so recognizing the uniqueness of how people are going to be able to be cooperative, I think, is really helpful. There's no such thing as resistance. That everybody has something that they're already doing well, and to make sure that you recognize what they're already doing well and then build from that. Again, we've talked small changes are important for growth. An equal opportunity for each person to have a voice, each person that's in the room to have a voice. And that was one of the things people said early on. When you're a supervisee and your opinion matters, it's so much easier to embrace feedback that's sometimes difficult to hear if you know at the end of that, you're going to have a voice as well. And then just like therapy sessions or coaching sessions, supervision sessions are also co-created. There doesn't have to be the whole hierarchy with I'm in charge and you're not. That might be the reality, but there can be mutual learning that happens. I think, you know, supervisees can learn from their supervisor, but supervisors certainly can learn from their supervisees as well. Is there another question, Ashley? Or comment?
It says, if a therapist, coach, teacher asks a question, the client or student cannot not think about it. That is one way of cooperating.
Right. Right. Those are kind of interesting. You put that out there. It's like that seed that you hope is going to germinate. But once it's been said, it's there and it's processing and going through their mind. So yes, that's a great thing. So these similarities all came from the 100 Key Points brief solution focused brief therapy book that probably a lot of you have already read, but I really wanted to go through that and see how many similarities there are between doing solution-focused brief therapy and doing solution-focused supervision. And then, okay, so this is some similarities also, and these are some of the skills from Ben Furman's Kids Skills workshop or website. And I love the description that he has of things. It seems so simple, but yet so profound. So one of the things that he does is converts problems into skills that the person can learn. And when I've seen him talk about this, he talks about, because he works so much with little kids, that with kids, there's always a sense of shame if you're doing something wrong, or people are embarrassed that they're not doing things exactly right. But when you change that into there's a skill that you're missing, people are much more willing to talk about skills that they need to learn. And so that can be the same thing in supervision, that if like they don't end their sessions on time, then that's a skill that they need to learn. Or if they have trouble with quiet, then that's a skill that they need to learn. But instead of identifying something as they're doing it wrong or that their behavior is problematic, if you try and figure out what skill they're missing, then you can figure out ways to enhance that skill. And then once you've identified that skill, then you can talk about what are the benefits of having that new skill, both for themselves and for other people. So say an intern, I'll just stick with this, has a hard time sitting in quiet. Over the course of their career, that could be really problematic, especially depending on where they work and the type of people that they want to work with. And if you can't sit with quiet, that can be really difficult. So learning how to sit with quiet can be beneficial for you because you're less anxious in the session, you're not having all those conversations in your head with yourself during the session, but it also really benefits everyone that you work with that just might need a little bit more time to process. So when you identify the benefits of learning a new skill and provide an explanation like that, I think it really helps people want to embrace those things, even if they're difficult and unknown right now. And then I love this idea of finding supporters to help with the new skill. And I will say, I think that's one of the advantages our agency has of having so many interns is we usually have opportunities for them to work in groups together. And so nobody's expected to be an expert. They're all expected to be learning new things. And so finding other people that haven't quite polished their skills can be really helpful. Or conversely, finding a mentor that's able to be really encouraging and help set an example for them, that can be really beneficial for them to be able to get support while they're having difficulty or afraid to learn a new skill, as well as keeping that new skill going once it's kind of in its early phases. And then I know that this is designed for kids, but I just think this is so valuable for adults as well. What are the best ways to remind that person about their new skill? Nobody really wants to be nagged in their supervision sessions. And so what is the best way for you to remind them, for you to ask them about their practicing of that skill? I think that just, again, it goes back to really giving the person a voice and making sure that you're acting in a way that's in their best interest and fits best with them. And then the last, again, I know this is designed for kids, but like as an adult, I never get tired of this either. To plan to celebrate the success of attaining and then maintaining the new skill. I think sometimes when you talk about, well, when you're able to do this skill, what can we do to celebrate that? Again, it goes back to that last comment of when you put the word out there of when you've learned this is so different than if you've learned this. And so when you're a supervisor talking about, well, when you've mastered this and when you're ready to move past this, the person inevitably feels like they can do that. It's such a great way of sharing your confidence with them. And it just seems so simple. And celebrating success doesn't need to be material things. You don't need to buy cake all the time, although cake is good. But it can just be looking back, rewarding themselves, taking ownership. Ashley has been a supervisee of mine, and I will say she probably hated this at the beginning, but I really have people take ownership of like, what do you do well? because people are really quite comfortable telling you areas where they feel like they fall short and things that they need to work on. In my experience, people are less confident in telling you what they do well. So when you celebrate success of attaining and maintaining skills, it really helps people take ownership of those skills and know that it's there now, like it's part of your toolbox. And when you move forward, this is something that's going to go with you. And for interns, especially if you're preparing them for job interviews, they have to be able to say what they're good at. Or if you're working in the field and you're looking for a promotion or a job at a new agency, you have to be able to identify what you do well. And when you can do that with confidence, and it just seems to be second nature, it comes across really well to the people that are interviewing you.
There was a question, Kathy.
Good. I'm going to stop. I have my email address on here if anybody needs that, and I can put that in the chat as well. But I'm going to stop sharing so we can come back and maybe chat a little bit more. Okay, so there's one more comment or question.
Yes, so it came from Sammy. It says, "Hi, Kathy. Does the supervisor also share some factual observation during the supervision?"
Absolutely. Yes, you want there to be factual information. And if there's areas that really could benefit from improvement, you certainly want to make sure that you're mentioning that. You don't need to sugarcoat areas that need improvement. You just need to identify that they need improvement and then help them figure out how they're going to improve those skills. So factual observations, I think, would be absolutely essential because it's part of the giving feedback. And so telling people what they're doing well, telling people what's okay but needs work, and then telling people like this is an area that really needs some focus and some attention. I think that that's a gift to give to people, to let them know where they are and what kinds of things they can do to enhance their professional skills. So good question. We have about 15 minutes left. So I'd just like to open it up if people have comments about things that you've done as a supervisor or things that you wish supervisors have done when you've been a supervisee.
Kathy.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes, go ahead.
Boo.
Yes.
I thought I would just say it verbally rather than type in the chat. Could you just give us a kind of from start to finish an encapsulation of what a typical supervision meeting, what it goes like? What's the kind of a topical flow or an outline or summary?
Sure, I can do that. So our supervision sessions are about an hour long. So kind of like a therapy session. We start with, well, I have the, what are your best hopes for the semester? Like I keep that handy. So I kind of take a look at that before we start. I don't usually mention it in the other sessions though. So I'll start with what are your best hopes for today? And they'll, I want to focus on this or want to learn more about that is kind of the answer. And then I'll ask what's been better this week. And so we address that. And then if there's nothing that kind of needs a lot of attention there, then we shift and we kind of go through the caseload of how many kiddos did you meet with, who's doing well, are there any areas where you're feeling stuck, where, tell me about someone you worked with where you felt really good and what was that like and what was happening. And then is there anybody that you need some guidance or ideas or those kinds of things. So we're looking at all of the different aspects. At some point, I've looked at their documentation, and so I'll give them feedback about either they have all the things that they need, or there's different ways to phrase things. We talk about specific skills and maybe anything that they want to add to their toolbox. Sometimes we talk about what they're learning in school and how that either does or does not relate to what we're doing. We're really, really blessed that we work at an agency that doesn't require any type of diagnosing. So we don't have to focus on symptoms and problems and that kind of thing. So that's a blessing to have. So we talk about the kiddos that they see, but we also talk about them as professionals that are growing. And so it's a combination. And I will say, there's not two sessions that look exactly alike. So we do have, the best hopes, the what's been better. Towards the middle, I'll ask a scaling question. And again, it depends on if there's something we're working with on an ongoing basis, then we ask that, or we might create a new scale, or we might have multiple scales. Towards the end, I'll ask what they've been doing on their professional sustainability plan so that we address that every single week. And sometimes I went for a hike, I spent time with my girlfriend or boyfriend, it can be anything, but we want it to be at the forefront of their mind that they're doing those things. And then the last thing that we ask is there anything we as an agency could be doing better to enhance your experience here? So that we're open for feedback, and we're open if there's something that we're doing that's not, I don't want to say proper, we're doing something that's not enhancing their growth, we're open to that feedback as well. So that's kind of our structure.
You mentioned using scaling. How have you used exception questions, or maybe even the miracle question?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, those are not like essentially part of every single supervision, but when there's an appropriate place for it in the session, it absolutely, like if somebody's struggling with their confidence, which is a common issue the first month or two of school, when you come to the internship on the day that you're feeling completely confident in the way that's just right for you now, as somebody that's 2 months into your internship, what will that look like? What will the kids notice that's different? Yeah, we can ask all of those same kind of questions. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Was that what you were looking for?
Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
good. I think there's some others.
Yes.
Okay.
Shannon said, how can this work in a group context?
Okay, well, most of the supervision I've done is with individuals. At our agency, we also sometimes do dyads for supervision, and we ask the similar questions with the 2 people present. And then it's kind of fun because they hold each other accountable. We don't do group supervision. We do group training, but we don't do group supervision. I have found that that's a little bit trickier to give people really valuable feedback that might sometimes be hard to hear in front of peers. So we don't provide group supervision in that regard. We do group trainings. So was that what you were asking, or?
Yes, she
Yes,
said yes.
okay, thank you. Okay, good.
Joanna, I apologize if I said your name wrong. She asked, do you use any outcome measures to map positive efficacy?
We do. We have is it the ORS scale? I'm always getting the letters wrong. We do the ORS scale on our supervision sessions as well. So we have the supervisees rate the supervisors and provide feedback every time that we meet. And then we get that feedback of, so what did we do well? What did we not do well? Where do we have room for improvement? So yes, we do monitor that. Do you map that, Ashley? Do you?
Someone does, but I haven't.
I will say, I think luckily we've not had a lot of problems where it's been like somebody, then none of the supervisors have been called into their supervisor for correction. So I think we've spent a lot of time training the supervisors to do supervision well. But yes, we do track that. I forgot to say that. With the supervision best hopes, do you feel the need to ask more questions if the supervisees mention action? Yes, I think we asked a lot of follow-up questions. So what do you mean by something basically practical? Like I want to learn more? Is that kind of what you mean? Is that Jesse? Can you unmute or give me a little bit more information so I can make sure I'm answering you properly?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm thinking about, sometimes, so with a client, if they mention something that seems pretty basic, I might ask more questions to kind of develop that best hopes. And I wonder in supervision, I think sometimes maybe a supervisee might bring in, and nothing's standing out to me right off the top of my head, but maybe something that seems kind of basic. But sometimes maybe in supervision, it might be a basic thing that you need to work on. So I don't know, I'm just wondering if there might be times when you ask more questions to further develop the best hope, or does that seem like it's less of a need when it comes to supervision?
I think it depends on who you're doing the supervision with. So some people, and I think at the beginning of doing this type of supervision, there's like a little bit of a learning curve. And so once we've been doing this with anyone for about 2 months, they start to get the flow of, oh, if I don't give a specific answer, they're going to have follow-up questions. So it starts to kind of smooth itself out. At the beginning, when people don't quite understand where we're going with the best hopes, they'll be like, I want to learn more. Okay, can you give us a direction as to what you would like to learn more about? Or if you learn more, how is that going to be beneficial? And so there's a lot of follow-up questions. And then once they see it, like, oh, and then they'll get to, I really need to focus more on like doing some play work, or I have a kiddo that doesn't do well inside and I need some ideas for taking them outside, and how do I do that? And so, yeah, I think sometimes too, the other thing that happens is with students in college, around, well, in the US around Thanksgiving. So around like November, we're 3 months into a 4-month semester. There's just this lull, everybody's really tired. And so they go back to giving those really generic answers because they're just like, oh, I just want to get through the week. Okay. And so then we'll kind of give them a little bit of grace of, and if you get through the week, what's that going to look like? I just need to sleep this weekend, which then we shift to more of a focus on self-care. And then, okay, so if you're feeling like this, imagine the kiddos that we're seeing, they must be, their third grader must be feeling like this. If you're in college and you feel like this, what can you do differently this week when you're feeling a little sluggish, but the kiddos still need your full attention? And so we're able to kind of adapt and shift it that way, but that is a predictable pattern. And then it happens again in the spring when they're ready to just be done. The answers get a little more vague. And then we'll just kind of direct it a little bit with follow-up questions. So yeah, that's a good question. Oh, good, Annette. To do supervision with coaches, I would think that that would be really appropriate for them too.
Yeah, very similar, yeah.
And do you find that when you ask coaches what are their best hopes, they're kind of stunned, like, oh.
Well, yeah, they're stunned with solution focus, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, so many have not come across solution focus. So yeah, they are quite stunned.
It's just funny that people that do this with others, like, wait, you're asking me that question? And I will say too, once you get accustomed to doing this, you can do solution focused supervision in so many ways. So at the agency I'm at, we had a group of peers, and then one of the people was promoted. And so we did solution focus for them. And we did a small group of, what is this going to be like for your group to have your peer now your supervisor? And how are we all going to address that? What are your best hopes for the changes in your relationship? What are your best hopes in terms of communication? And so that was a really fun activity to do that. And now we have new people joining the team. And so we're going to start again of, what are your best hopes of all working together? What are your best hopes as a peer group? How are you going to be able to support one another? How will you know when that's happening? So there's a lot of really creative ways that you can do solution focused supervision and have it be really useful for the people that you're working with. And then you're just so reinforcing the strengths of the supervision, the solution focused model, that it's fun. I really enjoy it. Okay, have you used supervision with Supervise? Yes, I've used solution focused supervision with people that have a CBT approach, and they're okay with it because they see the value of the questions that are being asked. And we're not doing therapy with them. So having it be so focused on what they're doing well and giving them room for errors, I think is the most valuable part of it. Yeah. Okay, well, we are just about done. I am going to stop the recording.